You're listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. In this episode, I interview SIMMS Fishing Products CEO Casey Sheahan, and we talk a little fishing, what's new with SIMMS, environmental threats to our fisheries such as microplastics and climate change, and also what SIMMS is doing for conservation and the importance of protecting our water. This episode of The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies, whose mission is to solve the climate crisis by improving the social, environmental, and economic bottom lines of your business. Measure what matters with Emerger Strategies. So Casey, I wanted to get things kicked off here. How did you get into fishing, and what led you to SIMMS? I mean, let's just hear, I guess, the whole story.
Sure. Well, I grew up in California, specifically Santa Barbara, California, and Ojai, California. And my parents in 1959 bought some property in Jackson Hole, right inside Grand Teton National Park.
Wow.
So I started, my dad, he bought me a little spin fly combo rod called the Russ Peak. Russ Peak was a famous Southern California fly instructor, just great guy. And he taught my dad and I how to fish and how to fly cast. And I had this rod. I'd put a spin reel on it sometimes, and throw MEP spinners, and then I'd convert it over to a little fluger reel and fish dry flies to trout up in the ranch in Wyoming. But I started fishing all over. On the way up to Wyoming, we'd stop at Lake Tahoe, and there's an older guy, a guy named Charlie Starbuck, who was one of my early heroes in life. And he was in high school at that time, and I was a little punk. I was probably 7, 8, and he would cast big super duper lures off the docks at Lake Tahoe, and reel in these monster rainbow trout. 24 inches. And I was so blown away by that. That just made me want to be like him, and every aspect of my life. It was a really pivotal moment. So I got more and more into fly fishing. As a kid, I started to learn how to tie flies and figure out different rods and reels. And by the time I was 16, I was a full blown addict. And I was living in the summers at our place in Jackson Hole. And I got my driver's license, that was a door opener for me, because now I could start, we were close to the Snake River and Fish Creek, but I could now get up to Yellowstone River and other places, go backpacking in the Wind Rivers. And that summer, in the fall, I got the opportunity to run shuttle for a bunch of the old dirtbag fly fishing guides in Jackson. Famous guy named John SIMMS, who was just starting his company, the SIMMS Fishing Products. And he also was a very famous innovator in avalanche gear, avalanche shovels and probes, and other detection devices called LifeLink. And that company was part of a company that owned Croakey's eyeglass retainers. So I ran shuttle for John. He was guiding it. Every year they had a bunch of outside business guys come down and fish for a week or two in the Tetons on the Snake River, and they took them out in these big black rubber rafts. I can't remember the name of the company. It was, I think it was like a mining company, or it wasn't Emerson Electric, but something like that. Kaiser Steel. It was Kaiser Steel. Okay. And these guys really loved this experience fishing with these guides. And so I'd hang out afterwards, and sometimes they might slip me a beer out of the 6-pack, and heard them talking. And I just wanted to be like these guys. I wanted to ski all winter on the ski patrol and be a fishing guide. And they started giving me chances to sometimes run a sag wagon raft, or one of the guides was too hungover and actually got to follow one of the other guides down and guide the rest of his clients in a separate boat. And so I was just winging it. And I'd say that passion has been with me my entire life. I famously went down to Argentina on my own and fished in Tierra del Fuego at about 1979, right in the height of the disappearances of people being thrown out of airplanes in Chile and Argentina. And it was a scary time for a young hippie kid at the age of 24. But I went to Tierra del Fuego and I walked up into a big estancia, which everyone knows now is the Estancia Maria Bete. And I kind of poached their lower pools right above tidewater. And I was reefing in these gigantic brown trout, between 10 and 18 pounds on a little 8-weight fly rod that a friend of mine in Jackson had wrapped for me with a little cheesy reel. And I couldn't believe it. I was just like so stoked. And that was when fishing really, really sunk its hooks, its teeth or whatever into me and set me on a lifetime path. So I ended up, over the years, I was a journalist, a ski journalist for years. I was in the outdoor industry in various jobs as running marketing for Nike ACG, and then Merrell Footwear and Keen Footwear. I ran Kelty Packs. I was their president for many years, and then got offered the job to be the CEO at Patagonia in 2005. And I did that for 9 years, and I loved it. It was the most amazing company ever. But after 9 years, you kind of feel yourself burning out and running out of ideas. And so I took some time off, and then I really fished. I got to go back down for my third time to Argentina, and I got to steelhead fish as much as I wanted. And about 2 years into this retirement, the current owner of SIMMS, Casey Walsh, came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of becoming the executive chairman, and do you know anybody that might want to come run SIMMS?" And I went, "Oh man, sure, make me an offer. I could be there in less than 2 months. Let's go." So it happened back in the end of 2017, and really excited to be back in Bozeman, Montana, a place I've visited so many times, and now I'll be living here full time and running this great company, wonderful people here right in the heart of Bozeman, and working with a lot of people who have been friends of mine for many years that also kind of assembled within the company over the last 2 years. So that's how I got to SIMMS. My checkered past in the outdoor and fishing industries is behind me. And
I'll have to make a note. I actually fell in love with fly fishing in Wyoming and lived in Jackson Hole for 4 years. And that's where I turned into a total nut about fishing, and to have the Tetons as a backdrop while falling in love with the sport is as you know is pretty romantic, and not a bad way to do it either. So
exactly, yeah.
Well, that's super cool. And I guess spring is being released and things like that. So wanted to take an opportunity to ask you what are some of the products that you're excited about launching?
Yeah, sure. Well, a couple of things going on for us this spring. Obviously, on the product side, we have relaunched our G4 Gore-Tex wader and wading boot, wader and jacket program, and new wading boots connected to that category. That's a super high end, top of the line product. That's it took us over 2 years to get it developed and finished and tested. And we spent a lot of time making sure that it was great product. And that actually came out at the end of 2019, but obviously this will be the first big full spring season that it launches. So that's really big for us. There's also just a really beautiful new line of sportswear as we expand into that category, both wovens and we do well with performance knits like our Solar Flex and Bug Stopper that keep the sun and bugs off you. Those have all been updated, and that's been fun to launch that and get great reception from the dealers and on various e-tail sites. The other thing is that we have changed our kind of call to action, our tagline for SIMMS to "You get one life, fish it well." And this is an all-encompassing message around not just, fishing well and having the right gear to do it with, but more than that, using the power of fishing and all the maybe softer sides of it. It's health and wellness benefits, which I think is really important in times like we're going through right now, where you might need to get away from your fellow man and fish in a more solitary way, just so you can stay away from the bugs that are flying around out there. And I mean the viral bugs. So I think what I was saying before the phone rang is that, we need breaks. We need breaks in our life. We need breaks from the stresses of life, and fishing provides an antidote to a number of different things on an emotional, physical, spiritual level. It's pure meditative interaction with the environment, and it's fun. It's beautiful. So that's been going on for us. So we just launched Fish It Well, and we're running a whole bunch of diaries around both fly and conventional angler athletes, and just talk a little bit about what goes on in their world. A little quote or two, trying to get our customers kind of connected to these great fishing athletes, ambassadors, influencers. Some of them are real environmental people. Some are giving back through Wounded Warriors and breast cancer for recovery, and all these kinds of different things that we support as a brand. Just having them tell their story in social media as much as possible, and that has been fun to kind of launch that this spring and see the excitement we're bringing to people who hopefully might not have known SIMMS before, but once they connect to us, they realize that, this is a great, authentic brand. It's been around for a long time. It's very high quality product. And there's a ethos with this brand that is like doing this sport, doing this activity at its highest level, and doing it with great confidence, but also knowing that when you operate at that level, you have an obligation, and you can enjoy the ability to give back what you have learned about fly casting, teaching others about people how to catch fish, helping people who are damaged and hurt and suffering because of PTSD from warfare or recovering from breast cancer operations, things like that. This sport has a lot to offer those people, and that's what I like about it. It's like taking what this sport has provided you and giving it back to others who can also enjoy it and get benefit from it.
Well, and I think that's really important, because the more anglers, in my opinion, the more anglers that are out there, we're going to have more conservationists. We're going to have more well-rounded people who ultimately, I think once you fall in love with the sport, as it sounds like both you and I have, at the end of the day, you want to protect what you love. And so that you start to develop that conservation ethos. You also want to share that experience. And, I went back to Jackson Hole this past summer, and I had my daughter on my little backpack and took her fishing. She'll never remember it. I'll remember it until the day I die. But those are the types of things that you get to share, and share those experiences with people who their memories for a lifetime. And those are the types of things that I think are the foundation of building good stewards and better leaders, honestly.
Yeah. And I think the best brands in any category, any sport category, or any even consumer packaged goods are the ones that elevate the sport itself or the activity itself to a whole nother level. And that's a sign of great authentic brands doing the best thing and taking a higher level approach in terms of their purposefulness to also support the activities and what's best for those activities, as opposed to just selling stuff. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So definitely a more purpose-driven approach. I guess this is shifting gears a little bit, but I was curious to know, what are some of the environmental threats that you see out there that are really impacting our fisheries, or have the potential to impact our fisheries, that are concerning to you?
Well, surely, we're all seeing a lot of attention, and I think deservedly so, to global warming. And at a micro level, this is the early melting of snowpacks in the springtime, greater droughts in some areas, huge storms that, in rainy areas that are far beyond what we're used to seeing historically. So the flooding concurrent with that. And then these hurricanes that are just like relentless and powerful and coming up out of nowhere. Those are big deals across this country, this part of North America. We were, concerned about that. And at the level of, at more micro levels, I think when I was at Patagonia and certainly now at SIMMS, we were greatly concerned with the impact of single-use plastic bottles and containers and other plastics that are showing up airborne and also carried through the water, microplastics in all of our bodies of water, the oceans, the rivers, the lakes. This is a serious deal because the microinvertebrates will take up these microplastics and then it just goes right up the food chain. So what's the health aspects of when that happens to all humans, all the fish we're eating, all these different interconnected species that rely on one another? It's a scary thought. And beyond that, just because I'm sort of into the steelhead and tarpon world as my favorite fish species, the ocean acidification and some of the warming of the ocean waters in the Pacific and other parts of the world too is really going to hurt our fishing because it suppresses the smaller chains of bait fish and microinvertebrates that they feed on and on up to the big fish and what these fish are carrying or how these fish are able to survive through these difficult ocean conditions. So I always feel like hunters, marine fishermen, fly fishermen are the first ones to kind of see what's coming because they're out watching the baseline shift every season of the year, and they're not waiting for scientific studies to confirm this. They're just noticing that timing of fish runs changes, the environment's changing, the weather's changing from when they were 20, 30, 40 years ago, and it's amazing how exponentially fast things are changing right now. It just blows my mind that we're seeing sea level rises happening at a much faster scale than we had previously. I was just over in Switzerland a couple of weeks ago and just seeing green grass and ski runs with no snow on them and people just living like, this is the new normal. The glaciers are melting here and we're just getting used to it because it's already happened. And it started happening 25, 30 years ago, and it's unrelenting. So what does that do to our sport wherever it's practiced? Can it be a good thing, or is it pretty tough on those species that rely on cold, clean water?
Yeah. And we're so to give you an example too of like what we're seeing in Charleston is unprecedented. Every year it's a new record for number of days that it floods here. But also just anecdotally, like some friends and I were talking and, so we get, on full moons and new moons, we get bigger tides like anywhere. But, here, the what we call a flood tide, and that's when we fish for tailing redfish in the marsh grass. And it, like, you'd look at the tide chart and you'd be like, okay, so we have about an average tidal swing of about 5 feet, and on a flood tide, you're looking at around 6 feet, and it was calling for like 6 feet, but I'm like waiting a flat, being like, this is 18 inches, like there's no like, yeah, like I don't have to be a scientist. I'm looking at this going, this was only supposed to be 12 inches above the, in areas that I fish all the time. And it's way more water moving in there. And so, just things like that you see and that they're happening. I've seen pictures of some guys that are catching a lot of snook here, which is, pretty crazy. Right. And when we didn't, and we'll see more of that, the more winters we have where we don't have freezes. And so, you're starting to see, I interviewed the guys from the American Saltwater Guides Association, and they were telling me that Virginia is opening a white shrimp fishery because shrimp are moving that far north, and they've never had them up there before. So, wow. I mean, it's happening now, and like you said, at a rapid pace. So I think that part of the answer, is like, well, what can you do? And part of that answer is understanding how to be resilient, I guess, and then a level of, okay, well, how can we tackle this? But also doing what we can as individuals and businesses, and frankly, as voters, to let our elected officials know that, hey, climate change is important to us. I'm an angler or I'm a hunter, and this is not a conservative or a liberal issue. This is science, and I'm watching it happen right now. Like it's happening, yeah. And so I think for me, I think that's something everyone that's listening. If you're going, well, what is something that I can do? I mean, you can get on the phone and let people know, that your elected officials know that this is important.
Yep. Agreed. Definitely.
Yeah. So, all right. So this does bring up, is there something that, so we know, like global warming, we've covered that. I mean, that's a major issue impacting our fisheries today, and will continue to impact them. What are some of the things? Is SIMMS doing anything as a company to address some of these issues?
Well, I think that just specifically around microplastics first, this is really an outdoor apparel issue. Anybody who uses polyester knits and wovens in their lines has this as an issue, as a byproduct, in the same way that the single-use plastic bottle guys have this issue. And our approach is, and think about it from our wader standpoint, these are long chain molecules that last for a tremendously long time. And we are just trying to build the highest quality product we have, so it's not getting disposed so readily. Our waders last 20 years. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, gosh, those waders, they're amazing. I've had them for so long, and I had to patch a hole in them one time, but that was about it. That is probably the best solution from a sustainability standpoint, to have product to last as long as possible. But we're always looking at fabrics that have some recycled content, or the recyclable, and a lot of the off-the-shelf fleeces and other polyester garments can be returned and used in a new garment. And that's something that Patagonia certainly pioneered and is continuing to push. And so we're happy to ride along with that, because they've proven the model that you can be successful doing the right thing like this, and minimize some of the impact you have on the planet. Our efforts on the other side of the equation are just from a conservation standpoint, supporting the best causes that we can. Many of them are in our backyards. Many of them are in other parts of the world. A couple are, Trout Unlimited is a very effective organization protecting waters that might be impacted by oil and gas, fracking, from pollution, from other point source mining operations, things like that, and then working with local chapters on issues. Casey Walsh, the owner of SIMMS, and I did a video before the last election in November, trying to rally people to come out and vote for some legislation that was coming up before the voters in Montana, to say, let's just make the mining companies put aside a bond to pay for any future damage that is inevitably going to be created in their backyards, in their mines, and have them pay for the cleanup, which will probably come at some point down the line. And our current mining law doesn't really do much of that. And these are a lot of these mining companies are out of country, and we have a big issue with Pebble Mine that SIMMS has really jumped on. That battle is far from over, and Pebble Mine could go online here in a couple of years after all the court battles, and that would be devastating to this Bristol Bay sockeye salmon, another salmon that use that water source. It's a gigantic part of a more sustainable fishery, and Alaska keeps a lot of people employed. There's a sport fishing aspect to it, and it's just such a pristine, beautiful part of the world. You just go, how could we destroy that with all the heavy leads and arsenics and all the other byproduct chemicals that come out of copper mining? That would just be tragic. So we're fighting that and fighting things in our backyard with the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, a lot of other groups on the various rivers where we try to give them resources to do the research, do the science, do the cleanup, and fight for their local stream, which is a really good way to get a whole spectrum of fishermen and conservationists involved, working together, arm in arm, to protect these incredibly valuable resources for the long term. Once you destroy a river, it is long time before you even have the possibility of bringing it back into any semblance of its original shape. So better to protect it and keep it the way it is, because water is going to be the most precious resource on the planet, far so more than oil. Water trumps arable land. It is the resources that we're probably going to run out of first. And that will be a scary moment if the population survives our current crisis and continues on the trajectory it's been on for 100 to 200 years.
Isn't that wild that that we have to talk about protecting water? That's still mind blowing to me. I mean, you're exactly right, but it's almost fascinating that it's like, do we have to remind ourselves that we can't survive without clean water, and that should be the number one priority and consideration? And when we do whatever it is that we do, is how is this impacting the water and the environment? It's
we take it for granted. We take it for granted. We always have. It's always been abundant. You go to the sink to wash the dishes, and my wife harps at me when I brush my teeth, or you're just wasteful. You leave the water running. I go, oh God, yeah, I do. I'm terrible.
Yeah,
she's right. It's like it's any small amount, and you've seen the old ad about the fish in the fish bowl, with no water in it. It's like what the analogy is that we're dewatering these fisheries resources, but we're also dewatering the aquifers in general, and we're just sending stuff into sewage treatment plants that doesn't need to go there. And what's coming out of there can be tainted. So we just have to be mindful of this and protect the headwaters. Take a hard look at dams. Are they really doing what we want them to do? Can we get away from them in certain watersheds to free up natural flowing rivers so that the fish can both go up and go down, the smolts can migrate. It's just got to be thinking about it and how precious it really is.
Yeah, that's this is actually so this is super relevant, I think, with everything that's going on with coronavirus. But I saw on social media, so you're always, I don't know, I'm always trying to look for, because it gets depressing, right? And like you kind of get beat over the head with a lot of this stuff, and it's just almost like can feel defeated. But I'm always looking for a silver lining and a positive spin on things. And are there any success stories or things that have inspired you that on the conservation or sustainability front that you care to share with everyone?
Well, there have been a lot of big wins recently. I think the Greater Yellowstone Coalition's success in blocking mines at the headwaters of the Yellowstone River, just outside of Yellowstone National Park, was a huge win. Huge win that we're very proud to have supported. And that's a really effective organization. And they did some really great grassroots work with local landowners and other stakeholders in that area, and got the mines themselves to back off from their plans, just by clearly demonstrating the impacts to the Paradise Valley and all the way down into Livingston in Montana, that beautiful valley, and that trout stream, which is, inspired a lot of us to fall in love with fly fishing, is further protected. It doesn't mean that there won't be other issues that occur, but it was just a great win for them. So that's one example. Always looking for things that we can do to minimize our impact as a company. One of the silver linings of this whole virus outbreak is that, business travel has been suspended. I think you'll see a lot of trade shows halted and canceled in our industry. And so not only will people not be traveling, but the carbon footprint impact of a giant trade show is not going to happen in many cases this spring and summer. So maybe that's a little difficult for the economy or for the fishing business in general, but certainly a good thing for the environment not to have that happen. So, we as humans, we get used to conducting ourselves and doing things for certain ways. Getting on an airplane to go to a 2-hour meeting, is that really necessary? Or is there another way to do that business? Just as we are, on this podcast, that we can do this all digitally and remotely, and I don't even have to be sitting in front of you to do it, and we can have a nice conversation. That is going to be the future, I think, for business for some time. And we've had this technology for a long time, and now we're being forced to use it, and I think it's great. The only problem is I'm kind of here in my house by myself. If I didn't have my wife and my dog here, I'd be a little lonely, because I miss my colleagues, and I miss the water cooler chat and the playing bocce ball and horseshoes and hanging out with them. So and I'm missing that right now.
Yeah, no, but you're right, and you know what I think that is going to come of this. So I think it's going to force some interesting and cool innovation. I think that you'll start to see perhaps some emerging technologies that are going to help, like a trade show, for example, like to do a digital trade show where it's like, hey, film your, whatever you're introducing as new products, make your ad for it, like basically figure out a way to make an online trade show still happen and still have sponsors and still be good for buyers and sellers, because you have to, because there's these restrictions and doing what you have to do. But I'm starting to see all sorts of interesting things. Like this morning, my daughter goes to this like little music class, and they did it on Facebook Live today. So we were still able to sit in our den and still go through her music class. So I think it's going to be interesting. And I think as a result, we're going to wind up seeing some pretty cool things that are actually maybe going to stick and that are better for the environment and utilizing technology that exists today.
I totally agree. I think, as they say, crisis is opportunity. But, if you look at the things that are going to change in the next couple of months, 3 months, 6 months, we don't know how long, in the world in general, new patterns of behavior will emerge, and there'll be new opportunities for brands in the outdoor space and the fishing space to connect with people, to give them what they need to enjoy themselves outdoors in the brave new world. And I think that's how these difficult economic situations turn into positives over time. It's like I remember once talking about the 2008 crisis, 2009, and at Patagonia, it was a huge growth period for us. We kind of changed our marketing to don't buy this jacket and think about your purchases and be more sustainable. And we were bringing back product and recycling it. The business really took off. for Patagonia at that time. I think we were getting like 30-40% increases a year, and it was really a heyday. And part of the message there was kind of like, when a forest fire burns through and burns things to the ground, everybody goes, "Oh, how sad, the forest fire. It burned up Yellowstone National Park. It'll never recover." Go to Yellowstone now and see how much healthier Yellowstone is after those fires burned through 20, 25 years ago. It needed to burn because the trees were getting too close together. They needed to have a carbon release and sequestered in the soil. And animals like to have open space for grazing, and they weren't just crowded out by these little thin, skinny lodgepole pines. Now it's a different place. There's meadows and a mix of different age trees and more diversity in terms of the plant life. So that's an example of after the apocalypse, maybe if you have a longer term view, it'll be a good thing for business, for mankind, for the environment, whatever it is. I like to think it positively about the opportunities that do present themselves going through a time like this.
Yeah. I agree. I couldn't agree more with you there. So that's probably a pretty decent note to try and wrap on, Casey. But I do want to end with a good positive message, I think. But I do want to make sure that I'm not leaving anything out, or was there something specifically you wanted to make sure that we covered in the interview that maybe I missed?
No, I don't think so. I'm super happy to be at the SIMMS Fishing Products, and I have a great team with me. And when business gets back to usual, love to have any of our customers come see our facility, see waders being made. It's an American wading manufacturing facility, which is it's a rare breed. But love to have you in and give you some tips on where to go in our local area. We have the Gallatin and the Madison and the Missouri and a lot of great rivers right in our backyard, and a whole crew of people just passionate about this sport and just hoping that we'll get through this awkward time in our economic history and our health history and move on and get people back outdoors enjoying this sport. It is definitely the answer to what we have going on in the world today, and I think it will be there when all is said and done. This is all over. So just happy to be spending some time with you and tell you a little bit more about SIMMS and about my checkered career history, and I'm very honored that you invited me onto the show.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Sustainable Angler. Special thanks to Casey Sheahan for carving some time out for me. The Sustainable Angler podcast is available anywhere you listen or get your podcast: iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. If you like what you're hearing, would really appreciate a rating and review on iTunes, because that helps us out a lot. Thanks, and have a good one.